Britain will vote this week to stay in or exit from the European Union, the so-called Brexit vote. Official campaigning stopped Thursday when a British lawmaker campaigning against the exit was shot to death in the street. Witnesses reported the assailant yelled "Britain first" as he shot, stabbed, and kicked the mother of two. Those who want to stay in the EU claim it brings economic and security benefits. Those who want out say it will allow Britain to control its own destiny on the economy and immigration. Keeping the EU together has been tested over the past year, largely by strains created by the mass immigration of refugees from Syria and other nations. Something can be told about the state of a nation by looking at the state of its news press. Are a variety of voices and views freely represented, or are they being shouted down and shut out? Censorship and press freedoms were the focus at an international journalism conference I attended in Moscow, Russia this month. And it's clear that many countries are, like the U.S., struggling with powers attempting to control the message. At Russia's state-run Rossiya Segondia news agency in Moscow, 300 journalists met for a conference titled "New Era of Journalism, Farewell to Mainstream." Whether reporting on views left, right, or neutral, journalists describe trends towards censorship. What's the state of journalism in terms of a free press and reporting where you are?
We have a very free and robust press, although at the moment we have a state broadcaster which is starting to move slightly away from that in terms of not showing various forms of protest. So there's a little bit of censorship clicking in, which is something that the majority of the free press that I work for are really upset about.
This is in South Africa.
This is in South Africa. And so what the state broadcaster is doing is then telling people about the protest, but are worried that if they show demonstrations, that will then lead to more demonstrations. So they're not showing that at all. They're trying to sanitize the news. What forms of censorship are faced in China? Is it very blatant? Are journalists sometimes told by government what not to publish, or is it more of a self-controlled censorship?
There are certainly self-censorship, but there are also lots of censorship from the government. I have a friend who is editor of a popular newspaper in Beijing, and she received a long list of things not to talk about.
I'd see a big change really in the British media. Certainly in the last 10 and particularly in the last 5 years, that the parameters of the things that we can sort of say and write about are much narrower now than they used to be.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I call it the new McCarthyism, and I don't think that's overstating it. There really is this very pernicious gatekeeping going on, targeting of any journalists who really put their heads above the parapet on certain issues, and foreign policy is the number one sort of no-go area, really. And this is a kind of bullying and intimidation, and it's all meant to silence journalists and also to push them out of the mainstream. They don't want you in that mainstream. They're terrified of you being in the mainstream outlets. And looking at my journalism and a journalist like me, we find it harder to write, for example, on foreign policy in the mainstream now than 10, 15 years ago.
All the countrymen, they should have a right to get information, government information, the monetary information, everything. So therefore, that's why our new government is going to introduce Media Information Act, a new act. Nowadays, they are debating in the parliament about this act.
You think it's going to pass?
Yes, we will be able to implement this.
Do you feel you've met with some forms of censorship in the UK over the topics that you try to cover?
Yes, I mean, not for general political economy, where I'm reasonably well known as an occasional advisor over many years, but on the subject of the obnoxious origins of the European Union in its corporatist fascist foundations, there has been considerable censorship.
Russia and Syria's news agencies signed cooperative agreements at the event. One Syrian news agency official said it's hard to know where the truth lies in news coverage about his war-torn country. Sometimes, he says, the houses of journalists are hit by mortar shells in retaliation for their reporting. Russian President Vladimir Putin made a surprise visit. He encouraged journalists to tell the story of Russia's rich culture and economy. But Russia faces its own criticism. Reporters Without Borders ranks Russia 148th out of 180 countries on its annual Press Freedom Index for what the group calls the stifling atmosphere for independent reporters. By the way, the U.S. ranks 41st on this year's Press Freedom Index, drawing criticism for the government's war on whistleblowers. When we return on Full Measure, the battle to close the Guantanamo Bay prison housing Islamic extremists may be coming to a quiet end.